My fellow Americans, I've spoken to you from this historic office on many occasions and about many things.
It's history.
Gentlemen, this is Democracy Manifest.
The events.
Get your hand off my penis!
الحكم على المدان صدام حسين المجيد لارتكاب
The figures.
I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky.
The drama.
And you see that furniture they bought from Jordan Marsh? I want to find out who paid for that furniture because I wanted to go back to Jordan Marsh.
President Kennedy died at 1 p.m.
The deep questions.
Stop, please. Please sit down.
Notre client dit qu'il a bu un poison.
It's mythic mayhem.
I've always been a fan of balloons. Helium, regular, animal. It's never mattered to me. And one thing on my proverbial bucket list has always been to try riding in one of those hot air balloons. You know, the kind with the little basket hanging underneath a huge balloon. And there's a guy operating a huge fire cannon that makes it go up somehow. I mean, it's just incredible. The other week, I took my kids to the carnival, and they had a balloon there. It looked like something out of Leonardo da Vinci's sketchbook. You ever seen that thing? It's this ancient tome. It must be over 1,000 years old at this point. Heavily degraded. But on it, you can actually see these drawings of all these crazy devices that Da Vinci dreamed up throughout his life. And, I mean, he didn't actually make any of this stuff, but he had the ideas in his head, and he was a great doodler. So, they were taking people up on the hot air balloon for little rides around the carnival. So I took my daughter, and we hopped inside the basket there, and the guy pulled the little rope and made the big jet thing shoot out flames. Sure enough, the balloon started going up and up and up, until we were so high the people below, well, they looked like ants. You know in the summer when you drop your ice cream cone on the ground, and you look at it about 5 minutes later, and it's just swarming with ants? That's what the carnival looked like from up in that balloon. It really kind of blew my mind in a way. I realized that humanity is just a bunch of ants swarming all over the proverbial ice cream scoop that is the planet Earth, trying to get a little sugar. We don't really know why. It's just what we do. Over the course of our lives, if we're lucky enough, we encounter these moments of absolute perspective shift. That's really what happened to me on the balloon ride, I think. And once you see the world, or humanity, in a new way, it's almost impossible to view it the old way ever again. And then I started wondering, you know, we all have these preconceived notions of events or periods in history. We view it a certain way, and we take it for granted that that's what it was like back then. But imagine, you know, if you could take a hot air balloon over Mesopotamia when those guys had the first harvests of wheat, what that might look like. Probably look like a bunch of little ants down there gathering little pieces of plants and bringing them back to their colony, turning it into cookies and cupcakes and stuff like that. And, you know, that's kind of how I like to approach history. I'm out here gathering the sugar for you, the listener, while you stay at home, safe and sound in the colony. I'm going to be doing just that on this special live broadcast of Mythic Mayhem, live on the Elephant Graveyard Radio Hour. I had to do this show under a different title because, well, I don't really want to bore you with the legal details. Just go along with it. These guys have supplied us with the balloon, which I'm actually about to get into now. I've got this all hooked up here to broadcast to you through the airwaves, wirelessly. We'll be touring around town here. And speaking of colonies, we are launching from the historic town of Chester, Pennsylvania. This was it was the first city in the state of Pennsylvania. They built it 200 years ago or whatever. The famous Quaker William Penn lived here. This is where he invented oatmeal. Back in those days, people basically only used oats to feed their horses and ponies. It wasn't until William Penn came sailing across the briny sea when that all changed. You see, sometimes history happens by design, but more often than not, it happens by complete accident. The story, as it's recorded in the town's official records, details the discovery of oatmeal in 1683. Quote, William Penn, who, having been granted ownership of this land by King Charles II, had sailed to this colony in the year 1682, bringing with him naught but his horse and his holy Bible. On the eve of July 7th of the following year, Penn was boiling water for to cook tubers when, upon becoming tangled in his own shoestrings, stumbled and knocked a bag of horse feed into the bubbling pot. Upon cooking the oats, Penn, out of necessity, consumed them all, afterwards remarking to feeling fully satisfied. Compelled to share his discovery, Penn summoned the local yeomanry to his cookout, and the entire town of Chester tried a taste of this sensational new flavor. Penn proclaimed the dish and dubbed it Oatmeal, for just one ingredient could embody an entire meal. Believe it or not, Penn refused to patent his invention. And according to our primary sources, not long after that, there were oatmeal shops popping up all over Chester. Every block had 2 or 3 shops competing against each other. Soon, the cockeyed optimism of the town's founders turned grim. Competition started kicking in, and things started to get ugly. Rivalries between the shops began brewing. One of the more successful shops was run by a man called Robert Armstrong. He was often a target for a lot of these up-and-coming oatmeal businesses who were ever increasingly beginning to operate like the mafia. There's a record here in our sources that details quite graphically when things got so out of control that Robert was finally murdered in the street. Quote, On the 8th day of November, 1685, Robert Armstrong was walking betwixt Main Street and Cordelia Road when 3 masked, armed men emerged from behind an apple cart. The men forced Armstrong to stand on an apple box and face north. Robert, fearing for his life, obliged the men. Upon stepping onto the box, a cannon hidden in a bush across the river suddenly fired. The lead orb quickly shot across the water, smashing Robert directly in the face. His skull shattered like an eggshell against the stone wall behind him. For a rare moment, the townsfolk actually paused the eating of their oatmeal, but seconds thereafter, simply carried on as if nothing had ever happened. The still young colony of Pennsylvania. Remember folks, the province of Pennsylvania was still only a few years old at this point, but they were already having their Gavrilo Princip match, hitting the Franz Ferdinand tinderbox moment here. The assassination of Robert Armstrong set off a chain reaction of reciprocal violence, with a level of brutality that you would more likely associate with people like the Mongols or the Vikings. Certainly not the United States of America, and certainly not the Quakers. But we have to remember to trust our primary sources here, even when things sound unbelievable. In retaliation for Armstrong's assassination, his number 2 guy and business partner, Clarence Crispin, brought it upon himself to avenge his death and make sure the enemy's oatmeal business would be unable to thrive in the wake of this attack. The week following Armstrong's death, Crispin acquired a large amount of a plant called monkshood, otherwise known as the Queen of Poisons, or aconite. This is a poison of the highest potency. Crispin one night broke into the competition's oatmeal shop and laced their entire stockpile of oats with all that monkshood. The next morning, as they did every day, the townsfolk came down the main street to settle in for their morning oats. They started gobbling up that slop, and pretty quickly, they began to drop, one by one. Diners at the other restaurants watched as these men and women would be stumbling down the street, green in the face, until dropping dead right in front of them. People were seen jumping, just completely delirious, jumping off the Main Street bridge into the ravine below. Again, and again, and again. Some vivid details of the incident were recorded in the journal of the town's minister, Reverend Barry Stumps. Quote, "The human ripples of pain are still heartbreaking when made visible to us now. Father abandoned child, wife husband, one brother another, for this illness seemed to strike through the breath and sight, and so they died, and none could be found to bury the dead for money or friendship. Members of a household brought their dead to a ditch as best they could, without priest, without divine offices." The final body count, after the townsfolk rounded up all the vile corpses they could, was 306 people, dead. And, according to the sources, while all this was happening, there was a clandestine movement forming behind the scenes, preparing to seize control of the city of Chester. There really was no formal police force in the sense that we have police today. Instead, a group of men, led by a guy called Sherp Dakins, formed a sort of ad hoc militia/law enforcement company, a kind of paramilitary mercenary force. We don't know who funded them, but a lot of historians will say it was William Penn himself. Others say it was a conglomerate of lords from back in England who wanted to rein in the chaos in the colonies in order to further their business pursuits in the New World. At any rate, Dakins' forces finally made their move and staged a coup d'etat on August 13th, 1694. Their first order of business was banning the sale of oatmeal outright for a period of 90 days in order to subdue the violence. Unfortunately, as it happens a lot of the time that these coups occur, some members of Dakins' forces took it upon themselves to go even further. From our sources, quote,
"On the afternoon of the 13th of August in the year of our Lord, 1685, the town of Chester was assailed by a company of militiamen led by Sherp Dakins. Dakins, having been armed by wealthy benefactors with musket and sword, quickly overpowered the local yeomanry and nailed a proclamation to the main gates of Chester, decreeing an absolute ban on the sale of oatmeal, with exception for the equine, to any man, woman, or child. Meanwhile, the more militant members of the militia took it upon themselves to act out their true goal. One by one, every oatmeal proprietor in Chester was yanked from their shop and led down the road at gunpoint. Wives and children wept in the street as dozens of oatmeal men were prodded along toward their final destination in the town square. Without ceremony, they were quickly ushered to the top of a gallows. One by one, they were hung to death, their discarded corpses carted away to be used as fertilizer in Dakins' new tobacco plantation.
One by one, each and every oatmeal proprietor was hung to death. There was no mercy. That day marked the end of Penn's utopian vision for a new society. He hit the booze hard and even abandoned his Quakerism, started smoking opium and jacking off all day. All right, well, we're climbing altitude now. Let's go to a song, and I'll try to get a feel for these controls. Does it have controls? How the hell do you even steer a balloon? Ben? I've lost contact with Ben, but that's okay. All right, well, we'll be flying down the Delaware River here, I guess. Hope you stick around and, actually fucking learn something. Here's some music. This is Blue Heaven by it doesn't say who it's by. I'm gonna take in the sights here for a sec. I want to enjoy this balloon shit. Fucking hate me, sue me, whatever. Folks, I can see how someone could develop a god complex soaring around above the rest of humanity. Look at them down there. Stupid idiots. Walking around like stupid fucking idiots. I don't know, it's also pointless. Like, what's the point of all these people? Do we need them?
Boy, we are really cruising now. We're floating above the Delaware River. I think that's Chester Island down there, which is actually in New Jersey, so I'm not interested. But you can imagine little William Penn and his horse coming down the river on his rowboat looking for somewhere cool to land. It's kind of crazy that he just as easily could have landed on the other side of the river in New Jersey, and then New Jersey would be Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania would be New Jersey, I guess. I mean, who knows how the timeline would play out in that case. Wild to think about, though. I don't think I can actually steer this thing. I kind of wish I had known that before coming up here. It goes fucking up and down, that's it. It's shit, just like everything else. I hate this fucking world.
I could snipe 30% of these useless skin bags and nobody would even notice. Maybe I fucking will.
Wait. Oh, cool. I can actually see the town of Essington down there. That's Tiny Cum Island. Tiny Cum. Or Tiny Cum. There's Romano's Pizzeria. Okay, I'm back in. I'm having a good time again. I forgot I had this little brochure I picked up at the bus terminal. Little Tiny Cum Island, part of the Pennsylvania Bureau of Forestry, consists of scrub forest and areas with a variety of vegetation, including wild rice and Walter's barnyard grass. Who gives a shit? And yep, there it is. Little Tiny Cum Island. Little Tiny Cum. Very cool. Wonder what goes on down there. We may never know. Woohoo! Fucking flying. Look at those stupid little shits down there. Idiots. Won't ever be mentioned in the history books, and for that reason and that reason alone, I actively despise you. Well, that was cool. Hey, so we are making some serious progress here. Oh, hey, look at that. I just got cell reception for a second there. It's just another troll gaslighting me about how I pronounce Louis the Pious. Yeah, that's indeed Tiny Cum Island down there. Yeah, Tiny Cum was actually the first European settlement in Pennsylvania. Before William Penn made a proper place, a bunch of Swedish fuckos made this town called New Sweden, under the rule of Royal Governor Johan Björnsson Prince. Very cringe. Hard to believe, but Sweden was actually once a respectable country, doing colonizing and stuff like that. They tried to be the first founders of America, but failed miserably. Eventually the Dutch came and chased them all out. And I mean, the Dutch aren't much better, really. But they chased the Swedes way out to the Midwest, and they stayed out there cooking their little meatballs or whatever, terrified to ever return to the East Coast. I honestly have a hard time taking any of those Germanic-type people seriously. I don't know, I can't explain it. I just find them all kind of cringe. The whole idea of the Pennsylvania Dutch is just so dumb. Stop trying to be special by speaking this horrendous Americanized German language. Can't you just be normal? And, I also don't like their head shapes. But, seems like some kind of big wind has picked up from the west, and we are moving quickly down the Delaware River here. We're, actually, I think we're headed straight for the airport there. So that's not good. Well, let's hope for the best here. If we enter that airspace, they'll probably shoot us down, which honestly wouldn't be the worst thing, considering I don't actually know how to land this thing. But this is the post-9/11 world, folks. Younger listeners might be shocked to know you used to be able to fly balloons all over the airport no problem. But that was another era. History moves us forward. Anyway, the airport here is built on the site of Hog Island. It's massive, this big chunk of land sticking out into the river. And actually, strangely enough, Hog Island was actually purchased in 1681, the same year William Penn invented his world-famous oatmeal. It was purchased by a guy called Otto Koch,
He was one of those Swedish dorks I mentioned earlier, and he actually tried growing oats and getting into the oatmeal racket. But he was so dumb that he built his farm on this flooded swamp island. It was impossible to grow anything there. He was like completely bamboozled. It's crazy to imagine if Otto Koch had managed to cultivate the fuck out of that island, he could have taken over the oatmeal racket and we'd be singing his praises instead of William Penn. They'd have called the state Coxsylvania. I mean, wouldn't that be something? But like, the guy was just a complete idiot. And now nobody on Earth alive today has ever heard of him except for me. So yeah, I've really got minimal control over this thing, but at least the broadcast is still working. If you are one of the people here in the chat, well, hello. I am seeing your messages coming in here. I don't have a keyboard or any way to reply, so, yeah. Whatever. But thanks for tuning in. Once again, this is the Elephant Graveyard Radio Hour. I'm Dan Carson, your guest host. We are actually going to throw to a segment here from our reporter, Bob. He's treated us to a couple stories so far. His adventures discovering island culture in the Caribbean, and something about a guy who played the bells and got killed and thrown in a river. Anyone remember that? Hello? Well, this week, instead of taking us around the world, Bob is bringing us home for his summer staycation. Let's hear it. Go ahead, Bobby.
Notes from my summer vacation. Summer is a time to reflect, a time to enjoy the fruits of one's labor after they've sorrowfully toiled all winter long. Sure enough, as I write this, I'm sitting under a big blue sky, peppered with little fluffy white clouds, the kind of clouds you would have seen probably when I was a kid. Pure clouds, popcorn clouds. I'm transported to an era long lost to the vast, expansive void of past time, where they started spraying all those fucking chemicals up there. I scan the sky looking for shapes. There's a dog, there's a lemon meringue pie, a chicken drumstick, a dragon, freedom, peace. Like these wee little puddles at my feet, the weight of last winter's suffering is being evaporated by this hot midday July sun. I sit back, eyes closed, as my thoughts blissfully sail away into the troposphere. Suddenly, I'm violently jerked back to reality by what I can only describe as the most atrocious music I've ever heard in my 70 years on this shithole planet. Oh, what the fuck? My eyes dart around rapidly in every direction as I attempt to pinpoint the source of this cacophonous invasion. In a daze, I stumble toward the thick cedar hedges in front of me. I can barely think, let alone operate my body. The sound piercing my delicate ears, I push forward. I struggle to focus, but miraculously I am able to observe several forms in motion through the dense hedgerow. A man, a child, a baby. I knew right away these lawless miscreants were the besiegers responsible for interrupting my transcendent bliss with this inhumane torment. Oh, what the fuck? After a few more arduous paces, I stood face to face with the horrific evergreen entanglement. Its incomprehensibly complex labyrinth of carbon compelled me to turn back. Nevertheless, I throw caution to the wind and begin to try to navigate my way through the seemingly impenetrable bush to make contact with the strangers on the other side. The razor-sharp twigs scrape across my delicate skin like the brutal claws of the ancient Sumerian beast, Anzu. As the foliage whips my face, I begin pathetically searching for any reason to turn back. It's 7:30 and Fraser is on. Did I forget to program the smart TV to record it? I better check. I want to be able to skip the commercials. No, I must continue. Finally, my noggin pops through the other side like a crowning baby earning its first breath of fresh air. And there they are. Oh, what the A man and his two children carelessly reveling joyfully in their yard, dancing under the warm afternoon sun. Coward, what kind of man hides behind his children like some kind of human shield? Meanwhile, the music blared on harshly. God, it sounds like I'm in fucking Baghdad. Ah! Christ, these fucking wasps. Excuse me. Excuse me? Excuse me? Do you speak English? You speak? Turn the music down. Turn the music down. Hello? Do you speak English? Manga junga duka duki bamomo maumo nanana banana planaya papi paipa. What the hell is this guy even saying? Fucking asshole. Sure, he turned it down, but I mean, it shouldn't come to this. Our old neighbors, they were great, didn't hear a peep. And when I did, at least they played music I liked. Good rock and roll stuff, you know? But this, I don't know what the hell it is, but I don't want to hear it. Adrenaline surges through my body as I walk back to my chair when my eye catches a glimpse of an unexpected hue. Yellow? Yellow on my cedar hedge. Yellow on a cedar hedge is the color of death. The shrub was dying, but why? The rest of the sprawling bush appeared healthy, lush, green as green can be. But this, a truly horrific sight. This yellow rot has taken hold of the pathetic plant right in front of the coward's yard. It doesn't take a forensic botanist to piece together what has happened here. Not only have they assailed me with sound, they have destroyed my beautiful bush. How could they have done this? I look through the dense brush once again, and my question is answered. They have strategically placed a small plastic storage container against the shrub, viciously killing it. I storm back to the edge of the yard, piercing through the hedge, this time unbothered by the spear-like branches scraping my face. Yeah, hello. The man turns to me, feigning a puzzled expression in what I can only assume is his feeble attempt to maintain his plausible deniability. Yeah, hello? You know you killed my fucking cedar hedge, right? I gesture to the yellow decay afflicting my accursed plant. You don't see this here? Yeah, and you see that? I shout as I point toward his plastic weapon. You moron. Yeah, are you fucking stupid? You've ruined the whole fucking thing. Jesus Christ. Don't be fucking stupid. We're tearing this whole hedgerow out and putting in a fence, and you're paying for it 50-50, which is a good fucking deal for you since you caused this whole issue in the first place. I blast the fuck out of there. The pathway through this doomed bush is well trodden now, and with ease I exit the shadows of its tragic foliage. I sit back in my chair, lean back and reconnect with the clouds. A sports car, a cheeseburger, a milkshake, big chunks of popcorn. The music having ceased, I float off into blissland once again. A warm breeze from the south rolls up and over me. Grasshoppers buzz in the distance as the ever-present hum of lawnmowers echoes throughout the daily ambience. I make arrangements with both the yardman and the fenceman, the latter having left me stranded on hold for several hours while begrudgingly answering my questions. The following day, I watched as yardman violently wrenched and snatched every last inch of cedar along my property. I could barely stand the sight of it, but out of respect, I painstakingly maintained my gaze. Long after the yardman had left without so much as condolences, I stood in the yard with a vacant stare, wandering amid a haze of emotions. The day passed into evening and into the night, where still I stood fixated on this horrific state of affairs. When finally the moon rose above the horizon, I regained control of my consciousness and retired to my chambers for slumber. Early the next morning, I was rudely awoken by the fenceman, who had showed up an hour ahead of the agreed-upon time of 11 a.m., banging, of course, at my front door, demanding to, with implements in hand, commence his labor. By this point, I had no will to endure any additional agony, and I issued him permittance to initiate the construction of the fence an hour early. The entire back of my property was now exposed to everyone behind me, and that needed to end immediately. Fenceman demanded answers to several questions, but I had had enough. As far as I was concerned, everything had already been discussed and agreed upon, so I demanded he begin work immediately. I then departed for lunch at Wendy's to try the cheddar mushroom melt. It's okay. I returned home to find the fenceman underway with his task, but am struck with a major problem. The fence is only 5 feet tall. Just 5 feet. I mean, I have nothing left. I don't even care anymore. I say nothing. I will deal with the consequences. I head to my basement hoping to cool off, both physically and emotionally. I lay upon my couch and turned on the television.
All right, tee shot for Mickelson. This better be a 4-wood.
The U.S. Open had just begun today, and Mickelson was expected to do great.
Doesn't like this one. Going way left, way left.
And he really was. He really was.
Damn. Well, there's a man who knows how to have a summer. You know, that really brings me back to my childhood, growing up in the suburbs of Los Angeles. My birthday is smack dab in the middle of summer, and to be honest, I didn't have a ton of friends back then. But my parents always wanted little Danny to get whatever he wanted. It was pretty sweet, I'll admit. Both my parents worked in Hollywood. Mummy was an actor. She was in some John Cassavetes movie or something, and a bunch of other crap. And Daddy was a producer, known for 1979's The Brood, 1980's Battle Beyond the Stars, and 1988's Fast Gun. Ever seen any of those? Well, neither have I. No one has. Because I didn't have any friends of my own, my parents would invite all their actor friends over with their kids. They all wanted to become child actors, right? So my mummy would lie and tell them that some big shot casting director was going to be at my birthday party, scouting for kids who showed acting potential. I remember one year when I was turning 7 years old, and I was utterly obsessed with the Civil War. Naturally, I asked my mummy and daddy for a Civil War-themed birthday party. I mean, everything from the decorations to costumes, even the cake, all Civil War. And I told them I wanted to recreate the Battle of the Crater. This brutal battle that took place in Petersburg, Virginia, in 1864. These nasty Confederate guys were charging into this huge hole for some reason, and the Union guys were blasting them from up top like target practice. Eventually, the bad guys climbed out of the hole and whipped the shit out of the Union guys. Almost 4,000 Union troops were slaughtered, along with 1,500 bad guys, and I just had to recreate that for my special day. Quote,
After weeks of preparation, on July 30th, Union forces exploded a mine in Major General Ambrose E. Burnside's 9 Corps sector, blowing a gap in the Confederate defenses of Petersburg, Virginia. Instead of being a decisive advantage to the Union, this precipitated a rapid deterioration in the Union position. Unit after unit charged into and around the crater, where most of the soldiers milled in confusion in the bottom of the crater. General Grant called this failed assault the saddest affair I have witnessed in this war.
When my, quote, friends finally arrived, they were divided up into 2 teams, the Confederacy and the Union. They all got costumes and everything. Even the clown my mom hired, you know, before I decided on the Civil War theme. Well, she had already paid for him in advance, so the clown joined the Confederacy. Obviously. Everyone knew they had to follow the rules, or they wouldn't get a slice of cake. We blasted our cap gun .577 caliber rifle muskets at each other. And by the end of it, all my friends on the Union side were lying there dead. Half my friends on my team were dead. And I was just standing there like, all right. Well, is that all there is to the Civil War? A bunch of guys show up in a field somewhere, blast each other with bullets, then leave and go sit in a hole for another 8 months? That was kind of a big moment for me. My first brush with profound disappointment. I mean, I kind of went into a black hole after that, kind of floated around from topic to topic. The War of Independence, the War of 1812, blah, blah, blah. The more I read about these events, the more disappointed I'd get when I actually learned what they were really about. They were just so much more exciting in my own head. The reality just, well, it couldn't live up to my imagination, I guess. I tried to become a real historian, you know, but when I tried to put my own spin on these historical topics, the professors would yell at me, and I mean, I got terrible grades. Abysmal. So I dropped out, went into art school, and there they actually encouraged me to use my imagination rather than get bogged down in being, you know, factual or whatever the eggheads over in the history building were demanding. Well, I am going to need a mental cleansing after going down memory lane there. Here's a song all about being disappointed about everything in this shit-ass world. This is the Elephant Graveyard Radio Hour. I'm Dan Carson, your special guest host. I'm gonna take a piss off the side of this balloon. Back in a minute.
Everything sucks, might as well quit. Great expectations, but everything's shit. It's my mistake, thinking things could be great. Everything's shit, man, hope you can relate. Tired as fuck, feeling weak and disjointed. Spent years searching earth just to be disappointed. Complete waste of time. Wish someone would have told me. Used to hope to find something, but that was the old me. The new me is quit. finding this one and realized that it wasn't gonna fix any of my problems, because deep down inside I just hate myself and hold on. Disappointment, disappointment, I hate everything, the world sucks shit. Nothing's good, it's just useless and dumb and not proper. Nobody cares, everyone settles for the worst shit. What a curse.
And now that I've shut my microphone off, I will commence the prayer. Dan, you can do this. You've prepared for this. You want this. You know it's your destiny. Just go with the flow. There is no free will. Surrender yourself and let the sails that buoy your soul be blown to the ends of whatever may be by the divine void winds from the very depths of nothingness. Your body is the mere dimensional imprint made when the one universal consciousness protrudes its polypidal pustules upon the fabric of space-time. Remember this, Daniel. You can do this. You've prepared for this. You want this.
On October 16th at approximately 8:37 p.m., Dan Carson opened his satchel, whereupon he withdrew the high-powered rifle stowed within. From the satchel's side pouch, he withdrew a package of ammunition and with steady hand began loading the firearm meticulously. He positioned the rifle beneath the rim of the basket of his hot air balloon, from which he was a dangle. He then returned the quantum crystal that powers his mind to its station inside its cerebral chamber, located in the deepest depths of his brain. With his precarious persona restored, Carson hit the power switch, reactivating the microphone in his hot air balloon studio.
Realizing that it wasn't going to fix any of my problems because deep down inside I hate myself.
Test. That was all a bit. All a bit. You're listening to the Elephant Graveyard Radio Hour. You're probably dying to get back to our William Penn story, so let's do it. Since William Penn's life was in ruins after the Oatmeal massacres and subsequent coup, he was holed up, pleasuring himself in some accursed drug dungeon. Meanwhile, Sherm Dakins and his men took the spoils of their victory and moved on to the next town they were eyeing for plunder. Well, after all that, the city of Chester was left entirely undefended. And in swoops old Benjamin Franklin. I love William Penn, but Benjamin Franklin is quite frankly a proper historical figure. William Penn comes close, but at the end of the day, let's be honest, nobody gives a shit about William Penn. We all know Benjamin Franklin is the real deal. Like Abraham Lincoln, or Sitting Bull, or Hitler. Just guys we all know about, right? You think history, you think of them. Just proper history, guys. Proper. This might be a bit of a tangent, but something I've been thinking about a lot lately is that there really is a duality to the universe. There is light on one side, dark on the other. Good and evil. Big and small. Nice and mean. Proper and not proper. For any concept that exists, there's a reversed reflection. So anything, or honestly anyone, that I see now, I run it through a little script in my head. If thing equals proper, then engage. Else, disregard. I think about that a lot. It's hard to keep believing in free will when you realize that all your thoughts and decisions are basically just simple programming loops and if statements. Well, let's talk about what's proper. First of all, whatever it is, it's got to be quality. Top quality. It's got to be something like something you would have seen when I was a kid. It's got to be classic. But it doesn't have to be old. It can be brand new and classic. That is possible. Sometimes you got to just trust your instincts. You can't explain it, and you don't have to. You see something proper, and you simply know it's proper. And if you don't know it's proper, well, that's an issue. And I don't know what to do about that. That's for you to work on. Like for me, I know that I know what's proper and not proper. I'm not worried about that. But I guess I just wish I lived in a world where everyone around me understood what's proper and not proper, or even paid attention to it. They don't seem to care at all. Like, it's crazy to me. I actually don't understand it. Sometimes it really does feel like a burden to have this kind of wisdom, you know? It's hard accepting that most people just don't know the proper and not proper quantum dichotomy that runs through the very fundamental fabric of the universe. And you know what? Maybe they're better off. What good has it really gotten me? On the other hand, what separates man from beast but his principles? We both eat, sleep, dream, fuck, suck, howl at the moon. But only mankind knows the glory of the golden rule. On the other hand, only mankind derives an evil, twisted thrill from desecrating the golden rule and all its virtues. It's complicated. It's almost like, imagine Plato's theory of forms had another tier above the ideal. Ideals of ideals. Proper forms. Compounding through complex interdimensional logic only accessible by the unconscious mind, which really is just the singular universal consciousness that manifests itself in our reality by imprinting upon the material world via the human mind and body. Now you might be wondering at this point what the hell I'm talking about. For those who were able to keep up, kudos. But for the rest of you, this is all to say that we can sit and ponder until we're blue in the face about the intentions of any one person. The decisions they made over the course of their life, whether they were noble or evil. But in the end, it really doesn't matter. We don't really decide anything. We travel through the universe on wings of fate. To deny this is to simply continue to travel on the wings while very stressed out and frazzled, insisting that the wings don't exist. But they're right there, you can see them, if you just meditate for like 10 friggin' seconds. The key is to accept that what you perceive as free will is in fact a series of rudimentary programming loops designed to maximize feeling good. At the end of the day, human beings, like every other disgusting creature on this earth, consist of three fundamental pieces. Although I'd argue it's simply one piece: the mouth, the tube, and the ass. Really though, it's just one tube. The rest of the body is merely accoutrement. Arms, legs, hair, it's decoration. The fundamental bit is the tube. And the tube's job is to get food in the tube and shit it out. That's it. That's all we are. We are no different than an amoeba, other than our fancy decorations. So, when we look at the life of a guy like William Penn, it's important to contextualize what he did and remember that he is, like everyone, a mouth, a tube, and an asshole. Now back to our story. With Penn in shambles, and the town being basically totally plundered by Sherp Dakins, who continued to run around ransacking the colony, the people of Chester, well, they had to be worried about the coming winter. They had already finished consuming the oat harvest of the previous year, and some were beginning to dip into their personal winter storages, despite it only being September, which is never a good sign. There was a total power vacuum left in the wake of Dakin's assault on Chester. The heads of the 5 Oatmeal families had been decapitated, literally. Their capos had been arrested and either hung or deported to the south. The oatmeal growers were still operating, but but the industry was in a state of utter dysfunction. The townsfolk appealed to William Penn to come back to town and, deal with the problems in his colony. But Penn simply remained in his home, which at this point was a massive tower he had erected atop the tallest hill on the edge of town. Nobody knew what he was doing in there, like he was some kind of enigmatic wizard. He was a complete recluse, sitting in his own personal Xanadu, slurping on honeydew and getting his rod juiced anytime he wished. Penn was losing money fast, and although his dream of building a utopian society in the New World was just about completely dead at this point, perhaps he still had that primal urge of not only self-preservation, but of a deep desire to thrive in the marketplace. Or maybe, just maybe, he wanted to simply maintain this ridiculous escapist lifestyle he had concocted, by any means necessary. Well, whatever the reason was, when that year's oat harvest started coming in, Penn rapidly assembled a militia of his most loyal captains to redirect grain shipments for the entire colony to his personal grain vault that he had constructed underneath his tower. But while Penn was up to his schemes, and remember guys, he had spent the last 5 or 6 years in hiding. Over that long of a period of time, a lot can change in society. As the 17th century rolled over into the 18th century, well, oats had simply begun to fall out of fashion. As pioneers continued to explore the ripe virgin lands of the newly discovered continent, merchants and traders were continuing to offer new and exciting foodstuffs. The newspapers were full of announcements every week, describing the new products soon to be for sale in the markets. You can imagine just how exciting it must have been to be around back then. Despite the lack of, any semblance of modern medicine, disease everywhere, famines, lawlessness. But to discover and try new fruits and vegetables all the time? Because basically, all you've ever known is like salted cod and parsnips. I mean, that's a thrill modern people will never get to partake of. An excerpt from the Chester Chronicle in 1698 reads, quote,
"New potatoes. We were favored with a sample of new potatoes last week, reared by Mr. Kennedy of Broca, near Isle of Wight County in Virginia. They were of the species called snowdrop, but were not larger than pigeon's eggs. Their flavor was exquisite, with a rich, creamy texture unrivaled by any wheat, barley, or oat."
End quote. At this point in our story, people just weren't into oats like they used to be. Potatoes, for example, were becoming incredibly compelling, and anybody who was anybody would be proud to walk around town boastfully chomping on a new kind of spud. But on the other hand, potatoes, tomatoes, corn, all this new exotic stuff was incredibly expensive. Only the upper classes could afford that stuff. And even then, it would be a special treat. Oats were still the bedrock of the Pennsylvanian diet, wholesome and affordable. And although our sources here tell us in great detail what happened next, they don't necessarily tell us why. Some historians argue that Penn's mental instability led him to believe he could control the marketplace by creating artificial scarcity, or simply, his traumatic disappointment following the Oatmeal Wars manifested as hoarding. Again, from the Chester Chronicle of that year, quote,
"An update on Lord W. Penn of Chester, namesake of this colony. He keeps to his bed in the tower, being ill of the gout both in his hands and feet. Yesterday a petition was presented at the Old Bailey, and a motion was made thereupon by Sir Constantine Phipps, in the name of Penelope Penn, daughter of William Penn, praying that her father, in consideration of his ill state of health occasioned by his close confinement, might be either through religious fervor persuaded to release the grain, or otherwise be brought to court for a speedy trial, whereupon he would be legally obliged to release the grain to the starving masses."
End quote. She compelled him, but Penn shut her down, and no court in the colony would rule on the matter, mainly because there were no courts in pioneer times. Meanwhile, farmers in the area continued to grow oats, only to have them pilfered at gunpoint by Penn, who promised to compensate them in due time. Penn began building small fortifications throughout the colony in order to monitor and control the movement of food products coming in from the rural areas. Eventually, the people in Chester ate through their reserves of oats. They began dipping into their winter stores, and soon, those too were depleted. It didn't take long for things to turn grim, and a full-on famine, entirely manufactured by Penn, remember, took hold of the entire colony. Slowly from the poorest classes upward, it began to affect everyone in Pennsylvania drastically, both in their physical health and their mental. The very fabric of society was being pulled apart, and even the wealthiest often couldn't escape the chaos caused by Penn's oatmeal famine. The rippling effects of the absolute disarray in which the city of Chester now found itself were far-reaching. For example, when food stocks had run out, people frequently resorted to consuming food that would normally be eaten by pets and livestock. This, in effect, reallocated a portion of the famine's effects onto the animal population, causing them to begin turning psychotic too. Dogs in particular have a special way of returning to their wild nature. Remember, folks, that there really is no genetic difference between a wild wolf and little Foofy, the Yorkie poo. Well, like the people, the dogs in and around Chester started forming their own gangs to try and survive and get the food in their tubes, as tubes do. They began terrorizing the population, rendering travel throughout the colony more hazardous than ever. From our sources, quote,
"No one has traveled the roads of Pennsylvania without experiencing the intolerable nuisance of cabin curs. These noxious animals, partaking nothing of the hospitable and friendly natures of the poor cottagers who own them, run out to the approach of a horseman or a carriage, and by their barking and attempts to bite the cattle, are often the cause of imminent danger, and, too frequently, of the most shocking accidents. A melancholy instance of this occurred lately in the neighborhood of New Chichester, as a party of ladies was returning from the country on a jaunting car. The horse, frightened by a dog which ran from a house on the roadside, galloped off, when Mrs. Dixon, wife of Sir Ambrose Dixon of the Pennsylvania Banking Company, attempting to disengage herself, was thrown from the car and killed on the spot. The other ladies escaped without any material injury, as she was consumed by the accursed hounds."
End quote. Throughout the colony, stories of absolute horrific fates became commonplace. The newspapers were full of miserable circumstances faced by the people of Chester, all because of William Penn's twisted ego. Here's another clipping from the Chester Chronicle newspaper from 1703, quote,
"A young lady named Farmia was found dead on the road at Rawton, near Swinetown, early yesterday morning. She wandered to the reservoir which supplies Swinetown with water. She there gave birth to a child, which she flung into the water. On her way home, she fell down and died from exhaustion."
End quote. As the winter of 1703 began to take its frigid hold on the colony, Penn delved further into madness. In January, our sources tell us, Penn instigated Chester's first ever oat drop in the town square. This, as many historians argue, was Penn's attempt to strengthen his control of the population, who he was beginning to worry could rise up against him at any time. What the oat drop was a randomly scheduled event in which a crate of oats, escorted by Penn's heavily armed militia, would be delivered to the Chester town square. The crate would be full of oats, but it was locked. Penn would have his men hang the key from the gallows, which were still set up from the Oatmeal war days, and a ladder, just barely high enough to be used to reach the key, would be placed nearby. The starving townsfolk would have to battle each other to not only get that key, but to open that crate and gather those oats. This led to some of the most brutal violence the town would ever see, and that's saying a lot. It was a lot like, those WWE ladder matches, if you've ever seen one of those. My favorite was always Triple H versus The Rock at SummerSlam in '98. But anyway, the Chester ladder matches were brutal, and people went for those oats by any means necessary. You kind of have to admire Penn, in a sick way, the way you might admire the efficiency of something like Hitler's blitzkrieg across Europe. An economic mastermind, he had found a way to artificially inflate the value of oats, which he was fully invested in. The oat drops had the effect of keeping the townsfolk's focus on the oat crates and the battle for the prize rather than Penn's deranged stranglehold over their lives. Rather than banding together to stop Penn and release all the oats, they just squabbled against each other. The oat drops had another side effect, though. They also kept Penn's obsessive focus fixated on his own little games. So much so that he failed to take notice of his old friend Caleb Pussy, who, over the past year, had begun to rake in millions of dollars in the newly established corn industry. Seizing an opportunity in the wake of Penn's madness, Pussy secretly began operating an underground corn network, evading Penn's militia checkpoints, and finally providing food for the starving masses living in Chester. Corn on the cob, cornmeal, creamed corn, whatever it was, Pussy had created a buzz around town about this hot new commodity. In March of 1702, Pussy unveiled his pièce de résistance, popped corn. This treat truly blew people's minds. I mean, can you even imagine seeing that for the first time? The little kernels sitting in the pot, kind of doing nothing, you know? Then all of a sudden, pop, 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 pop. Well, it blew people away, and it obliterated any remaining memory of the oatmeal craze. It was simply over for oatmeal. We had officially entered the era of corn. Eventually, word got around of Pussy's popped corn and his other corn products, and soon just about everyone in Chester was eating this stuff. It was only a matter of time until Penn caught on, and our sources tell us it was the rumors of popped corn that finally reached Penn and got him worked up enough to leave his tower. From our sources, quote,
On May 14th of 1703, William Penn, having kept to his chambers atop his tower north of the city for many months, was heard by many to be shrieking one evening upon hearing the news of his once friend Caleb Pussy's miraculous popped corn. He donned a disguise as a filthy peasant, dressed in rags and covered himself in excrement and piss, as he thought was best to blend in with the common folk. Penn, whose body was afflicted by some unknown illness, rendering his extremities extremely swollen and nearly useless, stumbled out of his tower gates to head into town and find out what this corn was all about. At approximately 8 o'clock, Penn entered the Green Dragon pub, whereupon he discovered the cook roasting corn kernels in a pot. Penn was delighted to discover that corn was indeed inferior to oats, as he suspected, as he observed the hard, inedible kernels sadly boiling away in the hot oil. As he turned to leave, however, the kernels began to explode, transforming into beautiful, fluffy white treats. The crowd in the pub erupted in applause. With tears in their eyes, they consumed every last piece of popped corn.
End quote. Whatever was left of Penn's psyche totally snapped that instant. Frantically, over the next week, Penn desperately attempted to cash out his massive storage of oatmeal, but upon visiting the vaults below his tower, potential buyers would discover Penn's oats to be completely rotted and infested with the fungus ergot, which Penn would try, without success, to market as extra flavor. One thing to keep in mind here is that Penn had been subsisting almost entirely on his own oatmeal stores for the better part of 2 years. And this ergot fungus, well, it rots the brain. The convulsive symptoms associated with ergot poisoning, such as crawling sensations in the skin, tingling in the fingers, vertigo, disturbances in sensation, hallucination, painful muscular contractions, as well as psychological symptoms such as mania, melancholia, psychosis, and delirium were all symptoms reported by those around Penn during this time, as he was consuming his fungally infected oats and delving deeper and deeper into absolute madness, completely disconnected from reality. Well, upon realizing he had no hope left, he ran to the safety of his grain vault sanctuary. This time, though, he went into the deepest depths of the vault, which had not been opened since the beginning of his oatmeal famine. What Penn discovered in that vault was on a level of dreadfulness that is just unspeakably horrifying. Inside that vault, he was met with the bizarre screams of men and women in hellish agony, moaning like the undead, echoing throughout the long, pitch-black stone chamber leading to the oat pit. There should not have been anyone down there at all, as the vault had been secured many months ago. Penn was as terrified as he was perplexed. Penn quickly lit his lantern to reveal the source of the horrendous cacophony. In front of him, his lamp illuminated the shocking scene of 50-some-odd people, completely nude, emaciated, malnourished, but still alive, covered in filth, hunched over on the floor, shoveling fistfuls of raw oats into their rotten, toothless mouths. At some point during the year-long famine, some of the locals evidently had tunneled into the underground oat chambers from the seclusion of a nearby forest. Inside the vault, a subterranean population of Chester folk had been living in complete darkness, frantically consuming nothing but the ergot-infested oats, slowly becoming more and more insane. Their minds completely obliterated by ergot, existing in a state of utter psychosis. They turned around to see Penn, their tormentor and the cause of their suffering, and starving for something more satisfying than oatmeal could ever be, set their sights on Penn's plump, juicy flesh. Penn turned back to the cellar door to flee when a small child of only 9 years old locked the gate before he could reach it. Penn was doomed. The underground oat cult started slowly lumbering toward Penn, and he had only two choices: be consumed by the subterranean maniacs, or end his own life on his terms. Penn started running as fast as his decrepit body would allow, and dived headfirst into his unfathomably deep pit of oats. He swam as deeply as he could, before becoming completely imprisoned by the weight of the grain, and there he died, alone, trying to eat his way out. His body was never recovered. And you know, as tragic as it sounds, I like to picture William Penn smiling as he tried to eat his way out of that pit of oats. A history professor once told me that there are two ways we learn. You can put your hand on the hot stove, or you can hear tales of people who already did that and how it turned out for them. Well, that's how it turned out for our friend William Penn. Think you want to touch that stove? Despite what we just heard, I know I do. As for Chester, with William Penn having been missing for over a year, in 1704, Caleb Pussy, who took possession of Penn's estate after marrying Penn's daughter Penny Penn, demolished the tower, leaving a pile of rubble which would become William Penn's tomb. After Penn's death, his corrupt sons John Penn and Thomas Penn took turns impersonating their father in order to swindle massive swaths of land from the indigenous Lenape people. What we commonly know as William Penn's legacy after the Chester days, when he moved his government to Philadelphia, was actually acted out by John and Thomas. The site of the old tower today can be found in a crappy little park just north of historic downtown Chester, surrounded by Chester Creek. Chester Regional Park. It's got a crappy little baseball diamond where the tower once stood. The land was preserved by Caleb Pussy after the assumed death of William Penn, out of respect for his wife Penny. To this day, it remains undeveloped and unrecognized as the resting place of the tragic American founder, William Penn. And what the hell? Would you look at that? Oh my fucking God. That's exactly where we are flying over now. My God, the prayer. It's all true. I don't know how this happened. I was so wrapped up in telling the story that I didn't even notice the wind shifted and blew us back to historic Chester, Pennsylvania. I can see the baseball diamond right down there, and actually, the balloon is starting to descend right down in the middle of it. Like it's my destiny or something. This is actually crazy, like, to land on William Penn's true tomb. What the hell, seriously? How? Oof. Well, folks, somehow we did it. We landed the balloon perfectly, just by happenstance, directly on top of the former site of William Penn's tower and grain vault. Wow. I mean, it's all down there, right under our feet. The vaults have been filled in with dirt, but even just being here is incredible and eerie. But hey, look at this. Look at this plant here. There are feral oats growing here. Oh, wow. These must be plants descended from Penn's oat vault, buried underground right in this very spot. And look at that. They're still covered in ergot. Unbelievable. I feel like the 18th century is reaching out to me from the nether void. I am one with the past and the collective consciousness from which we all derive our delusion of free will. Well, I simply must consume this. So next time you're at the grocery store, take a stroll down the cereal aisle to the oatmeal section, where even today, the grinning, maniacal face of the deranged famine architect and American founder William Penn stares back at you, reaching out from 1703, transcending time and space to stare into your consciousness, which is part of the same singular universal consciousness that manifested in Penn's body 320 years ago, thus completing the quantum circuit that was birthed into reality when you hit play on this podcast. Penn was right, folks. Extra flavor.
Hey, if you think this show is any good, send us a fucking buck, will ya? It's $1 a show. That's all we ask. And it ain't much. $1, one show. I don't want to hear your excuses. Pay up for the pod, or fuck right off. Dan wants that buck, and you're gonna toss it over now. $1 a show. That's it. Pay the man. Or face the executioner's axe. He'll chop your head off and all your other parts too. Into little tiny chunks. That's right, chunks. About the size of a Rubik's Cube. That's a standard imperial chunk when you're dealing with human meat. $1 a show. You can't even get a cup of coffee for $1 anymore. It's worthless, that buck. 2 podcasts would be $2. 3 podcasts, $3. I think you get the picture. $1 a show. If you can't afford that, then you really don't deserve to listen to the show. Sort out your shit, and then come back with your buck. All right? Goodbye.